Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be interviewing Shawn Wells today. Shawn Wells has a lot of different credentials: MPH, LDN, RD, CISSN, FISSN. He's the world leading nutritional biochemist and an expert on health optimization. He's formulated over 700 supplements, food and beverages, cosmeceuticals, and patented 20 novel ingredients including ticarin, dynamine, and dihydroberberine, and is now known as the ingredientologist, the scientist of ingredients. He was formerly a chief clinical dietitian with over a decade of clinical experience. He has counseled thousands of people on innovative health solutions such as keto, paleo, fasting, and supplements. He has also personally overcome various health issues, including Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression, insomnia, obesity, and a pituitary tumor. As a world-renowned thought leader on mitochondrial health, he's been paid to speak on 5 different continents. His insights have been prominently featured in documentaries and famous podcasts like Ben Greenfield and regularly on morning television. His expertise can help any health-conscious individual to better manage stress and experience greater resilience and more energy through utilizing his practical research-backed solutions. His book, The Energy Formula, has been recognized by both USA Today and Forbes, as well as an Amazon bestseller in multiple categories. Thank you for coming on, Shawn, and I'm really excited to ask you a bunch of different questions about supplements and just really drill you on a bunch of different topics in health.
You know what? I'm loving this, Joe, because I've known of you for years. It's been nice to share some spaces with you more recently in person as we've been traveling together internationally and different things. But I have followed your site, examine.com, like some of these things for years as I would look up, information on these ingredients or the genetics. And as I was doing my formulating, like your work with Self-Hack and Self-Decode, like I love it. So your sites have been some of my go-tos for years, and I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the nice compliment. And I'm really excited to ask you a bunch of questions now. The first question I have, and I think people are interested in this because I tell people I take 70 supplements a day. It actually is probably more. I'm actually counting it. Depends how you count it. So if you count it by the number of pills or the number of ingredients, it's probably more in the number of ingredients. I'm curious, how many supplements do you take a day?
I get that question a lot, and people are freaked out when they see, especially when I'm traveling, like even to places like we've been, like Helsinki or Amsterdam, and it's a lot. It's like even in my little suitcase, half of my little suitcase that goes with me on the plane, like one half, when you fold it out, one half is devoted to all the supplements. So
that's exactly me.
I got like one pair of sneakers that I'm wearing. I've got some clothes and then a ton of supplements. So it's real.
Let me tell you a little bit of a trick. I put supplements in my sneakers to save space. But
I love that. Yes, exactly. I probably take, when I'm traveling, I probably take about 25 or 30 supplements with me. When I'm not traveling, there's up to twice that are in play. I don't take everything every day. I do some intuitive supplementing. I rotate things in and out. Like, for example, like adaptogens, I might be using rhodiola at one moment and then an ashwagandha at another, and maca at another. Like, I like to rotate through things. I think that's good to have resets and reestablish and continue a higher level of efficacy by not just chronically taking everything. So that's something that I do. And then I take sometimes a complete vacation from all supplements, every now and then for just a week.
Interesting. I mean, I've tried that approach, just the chronic approach and taking breaks. And I think naturally everybody's going to take a break.
Yep.
You know, you just forget, or you're too busy one day, or whatever it is. There's going to be natural breaks. I don't find any problem by taking them every day. Like, is there any problem taking them every day? Okay, so let's say you build up some tolerance. So what? Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the concept, it depends. I would say if something's more of like a nutrient or like a substrate itself, let's say like a creatine or DHA, probably not. Like, it's good that you're getting these nutrients, obviously things like multivitamins and minerals. When we're talking about the actives in some herbs or some of these other compounds that might be working very similarly to a pharmaceutical counterpart where it's inhibiting an enzyme and therefore impeding a biological pathway, then I think that in time that you're going to get some homeostatic regulation where, you know, your body is going to figure out a way to go over, under, through naturally. And in those cases, I think it might make sense to have a reset every now and then and kind of cycle on and off.
Right. I think that makes sense. I think it does make sense to take breaks here and there. So I'm with you on that. It's funny. I recently uploaded a video to TikTok, and it got over 800,000 views. It's going viral. About me taking 70 supplements a day, and the comments are hilarious. Why so many? Liver is just gone. Why 70? That's expensive pee. There's no reason to do that. Oh my God. And it goes, the comments just go on and on. It's a funny video because I was basically checking my liver with an ultrasound. I also did some blood tests. Wanted to make sure that my liver is good, everything's good. And I told the doctor, I was just like, you know, I'm checking my liver. He's like, why are you checking your liver? You know, why are you doing this? I said, you know, I just want to know everything's good. And I want to make sure that my liver's good. And I told him, you know, I take 70 supplements a day, and, you know, this guy is in India, and I mean, it's even more foreign over there. And he's like, 70. I'm like, yeah, 70. He's like, he looks back at his screen and he's like, oh my God. and that was on film, and it seems like TikTok is eating that stuff up. So
that's amazing. First off, I love that video. Now I need to do a video like this. I love this. But I think there's a perception, you know, along those lines that this does potentially stress the liver. And I think that perception is erroneous. I would say that there is literally, in the food you eat, there's thousands of compounds, thousands, that we are consuming every day. And so you getting, you know, a few hundred from your supplements isn't necessarily a stress to your liver. Now, something that has some toxicity associated with it, let's say these supplements have heavy metals in them, have some methylated steroids in them, like if it was like a pro-hormone or, you know, some SARMs or, you know, things like that. Like, right. You know, there are, if, you know, obviously things like alcohol that the body needs to like detoxify and heavily metabolize to keep you safer, then those things are going to potentially be stresses. But even in those cases, unless your liver is already impaired, like you already have some kind of hepatic pathology, some kind of like at least a hepatitis, like a inflammation of the liver, you are not going to be impaired from even doing that. The liver is extremely resilient and incredible at doing what it does, at detoxifying, at metabolizing. So, you know, even in those cases, it's still doubtful unless you're just really consuming a considerable toxic load, which, you know, potentially can happen, but not with, I think, the supplements that you and I are consuming.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I would also add to that most of the supplements that we're consuming actually regenerate the liver quicker, right?
Exactly.
I would say,
yep.
Yeah, I actually, there was one instance where I took something that caused my liver enzymes to spike, and believe it or not, it was cinnamon. It wasn't the true cinnamon. It wasn't the Ceylon. It was the cinnamon cassia, and that's known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can have some heavy metals in that too. And a number of these herbs can potentially have that if they're in particular like more on the root side of the plants. You can get some of these heavy metals from the soils. And you just have to be careful with that. You have to make sure that your herbs are coming from. This is where it's really important to not just get herbs from wherever and wherever's cheapest, and like to get a source that is doing high-end quality control where they're looking at and testing for heavy metals in the raw ingredients as well as the finished product. And I can tell you companies that are trusted, like a Now Foods, a Thorne, a Zymogen, whoever, like these companies, Doctor's Best, like these companies that have been around for 20 years, Life Extension Foundation, they have the testing that's there, the quality control that's there, and you're not going to be getting these heavy metals. But if you're just buying something on Amazon that's the cheapest, I can't make promises about that. And you may be getting heavy metals because they're just trying to be the cheapest. And so that can cause stress to your liver. And it can be dangerous, absolutely. And it's hard to ever get rid of unless you do like chelation therapy and some of the detoxification that I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. I think in general, you want to go for big brands that have the ability to do in-house testing. And the brands you recommended are brands that I buy, like Now Foods and things like that. And, and so just big brands, and you're not going to generally have problems. I want to know, because I think that supplements have had a massive beneficial impact on my life. I want to know how they have impacted your life. You're like the king of supplements. And I think, and somebody on Instagram called me the god of supplements. I thought it was a funny name. Whatever. God, king. I think me and you are in a similar boat where we're a huge fan of supplements. Right. Tell me how supplements have changed your life.
In every way. I mean, what's cool is like one of my earliest memories is my mom. I'm a child of the 70s. I'm 48 years old, and my mom was selling and taking Shaklee supplements from Europe. It was a big brand before supplements even got hot here. And she had the tackle box in the 70s with all these they were whole food supplements from Europe, like really good ones. And I remembered like when I got sick, like she would give me this, Vita-Lee, which was like the whole food multivitamin. And she had, the little vitamin E soft gel and vitamin C, thanks to Dr. Linus Pauling's work, was huge as well. Like that was at the beginning of the 80s. We saw this boom around orthomolecular doses of ingredients, in particular these vitamins, and in particular vitamin C. There was a massive boom around the idea of a vitamin not just being for preventing deficiency like scurvy, but maybe having potent benefits at larger doses. That's what orthomolecular means. So that's what we started seeing with vitamin C is like, whoa, like what do these vitamins do in larger doses? And what do we see beyond scurvy and rickets and, pellagra, all these kind of things that are deficiencies? What do we see? And I started seeing those benefits. And, years later, when I got very sick with a bunch of autoimmune issues, Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr, I literally could not get out of bed for about 6 months. I needed help to get to the bathroom. I was so weak. Like it was like the worst, mono Epstein-Barr you can imagine. And it kept going. For some people, it doesn't leave. They don't get better. And that was me. And it took me diving into supplements and diving into like a ketogenic diet and paleo for me to like get my strength back and get back out of bed and really get my life back. And for a period of time, I was going to commit suicide because I thought my life was over. I thought I was just in bed and worthless for the rest of my life. And it was quite depressing. And that led to me going down this path of nutritional biochemistry and becoming a dietitian and a biochemist and really becoming the formulator that I am and seeing the power of these things. And then, even in my off hours when I wasn't studying or in class, I was working at GNCs and I was helping people because I believed in these things and I loved getting the questions. And, I was on message boards for all these different companies when those were popular, bodybuilding.com and all these different sites, answering questions because I believed in these things and they transformed my life, like literally from the point of death and worthlessness to living a vibrant life. So for me, supplements, got me to emerge out of my grave, really, and live the life that I'm living. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate for them. And I'm also a staunch defender of their efficacy. And I want to protect their legacy in that it frustrates me when so many people are doing dirty practices, that there are so many companies that are, just trying to sell cheap ingredients, cheap supplements, and really have dubious practices out there. And that frustrates me too, because my name, my legacy, my whole life is associated with supplements. So I get very angry at the idea of, a number of these supplements that are doing things like proprietary blends or, what have you, that, I want full transparency. I want the best ingredients at the proper doses and in the proper forms and the proper frequency, just like the best practices, the quality control that's there, all of those things in place. So I'm very passionate about them because they gave me my life back. And I've worked with so many people, like even stage 4 glioblastoma multiform people that were like given a death sentence that with supplements, with some advice that I gave them, were able to battle their way back from that. So, I've seen the power of supplements without a doubt in my life and other people's lives.
Interesting. And so you got into this after your disabilities that you got from Epstein-Barr and a bunch of health issues that struck you. That's how you really got into that's when you really got into it, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, one of the things I want to ask you about, and I think this is one of the biggest tragedies of, you see like those one studies that show vitamin E or,
yeah.
or some vitamin in higher doses increases your risk for something. And then all of a sudden these doctors, some of them, they say, no supplements work now. It's all garbage. Right. That's what pisses me off the most. And it's like, there's almost no supplements that actually don't work at all, that are just placebos, in my opinion. The supplements that are out there in the market, they do something, right? The question is, what exactly do they work for? Who do they work for? Those are different questions, but they do something. They are not placebos. Whereas some people want to make it as, you're just creating expensive pee, which is completely bogus. So tell me what you think about that stuff.
I mean, to say that these things are expensive pee is pretty ridiculous on several fronts. One, do you believe in the power of food? Because a number of these things are in the edible food world, potentially, as herbs, as bark, as plant, as leaves, as flowers, as stems. They are in animals like creatine and, protein, etc., these essential fatty acids. So to say that these things are, expensive pee in that sense is ridiculous. And then do you believe that taking pharmaceutical drugs are ridiculous? Because our supplements are often standardized to an active that will work like a pharmaceutical drug in that it will inhibit an enzyme like we're talking about and alter a pathway, skew a pathway to a certain benefit or outcome. So do you believe in that? And, so these things are very straightforward to me in that they do work. They have efficacy. To say that they are expensive pee is ridiculous. And then, how long, if we look at like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, we're looking at thousands of years of these ingredients being used for medicinal purposes. If we look at Ayurveda with Indian medicine, or all these different things, like actually, like look at adaptogens, which are typically the most storied of all cultures. If we go to Russia, it's rhodiola. If we go to India, it's ashwagandha. If we go to China, it's ginseng. If we go to South America, it's maca. We look at all these things, Siberian ginseng, potentially in the US or North America. Like, these ingredients are very powerful and have been used for hundreds to thousands of years with great intent and great effect. And the reason that they're still in use is because they do work. And so it's ridiculous to say these things don't work. And that absolutely blows my mind. And to say that it's expensive pee is ridiculous. Now, are there companies that are selling, let's say, ginseng that aren't selling the root standardized for ginsenosides? Absolutely. There's companies that are cashing in on the word ginseng, but are selling the rest of the plant and not the root, the part that's cheap and discarded, calling it ginseng and selling it to you for cheap. And then you're buying it because you don't know what to buy, because you didn't know to buy the root, because you didn't know to look for ginsenosides. You didn't know the correct standardization or part of the plant to look for, the genus and species and all of that, which can happen again with some of these cheaper brands. You're not going to see like a Thorn or Now do something like that, but you will see some of these other companies do that. So again, who are you supporting? It's not that these supplements don't work. It's that certain companies are putting supplements out that don't work intentionally so that you buy it. And that's very frustrating to me, of course.
Right, for sure. I'm also frustrated by that as well. Do you ever do megadosing experiments where you take a larger dosage of something just to see how it's working on your body?
Yeah, I do. And that's a great point right there. I mean, one, like we mentioned, the orthomolecular idea of that some of these nutrients, when larger dose, can have unique effects towards optimization. Think of like vitamin C, for example. I've gone IV and used 25 to 50 grams.
Wow.
I'm not talking 60 milligrams for scurvy.
Wow.
So, these things can have tremendous effect, of course, in doing things that aren't, again, preventing deficiency, but have some biological effect at larger doses. But I also understand what you're talking about, where you want to see if I, double or triple the dose, like what is it I'm seeing happen? Like, is it more pronounced? And then I can go back, to the level, like you can compare it essentially. I think that's the scientist in us is like, okay, like what happens at regular dose and what happens at double dose and what happens at triple dose? And is there a dose effect curve essentially where you're seeing, different effects or larger magnified effects at larger doses? And, that's something that I've done in many studies on these supplements for sure, is to see that dose effect curve. But
and you do that on yourself?
You do that like you do. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
all the time. All the
very
time.
similar.
I'm always experimenting.
There's not a lot of people that I know in that regard. First of all, they're taking as many supplements as we do, and that have been experimenting it with the amount of time that we've been experimenting and the amount of research. And just in general, I think in this regard, me and you are pretty unique in that way. Just how much and how we experiment more rigorously with things. I think it's quite unique, and I think there's like Ray Kurzweil. Can you think of any other people that really take a lot of supplements, know what they're doing, and have been taking it for a long time?
Ben Greenfield.
How many does he take a day?
Earlier today.
That's okay. He's not a bad one.
Dude, when I have sat with Ben, it is like insane how many like peptides and supplements and things are going on. It is like, I think I'm a little crazy and you're a little crazy, but like Ben is like even on a different level from us. Like it's like every 5 minutes there's something going in or on his body. It's quite incredible. So he's definitely the interesting scientific experiment. But I think, for me, one, I'm formulating supplements. 2, I'm patenting unique ingredients. 3, I'm doing studies on these ingredients. So there's a part of me, and then 4, I'm doing a lot of this for myself. It's like I'm formulating for myself. It's like, oh, I want to take this product. Like, what would I want to take? So like, there's a lot of that going on when I'm playing with these ingredients to see if there is a magnified effect, or to see whether we should get a study done on this or file a patent around this. Like, it's just the way I think. And certainly I'm trying to affect like the anti-aging pathways and performance pathways like you are. So I'm constantly trying to exploit these ingredients and these pathways as you are.
Is Ben taking a bunch of supplements, or is he taking mainly like just crazy peptides or stuff like that?
All of it, like everything and anything.
How many supplements does he take a day?
I don't even know. I've never, but it's like literally just all day long. There's stuff happening. It's like, there's like red light, and there's peptides, and there's supplements, and there's like, there's liver chunks, and like it's like, and then there's some exercise he's doing, and then it's like back to the red light and back to the nano V, and it's like Ben is like no BS. Like, you want to talk about someone who really lives all this stuff? He does. It is a different level. I'm telling you, it's not just like some guy talking about biohacking. All this stuff he literally does. But he's one of the few people that can carry this off.
I would say actually recently, I'd say in the past like 3-4 months, what you described is exactly how I am. Just the whole day, I'm doing something. I'm popping this pill, I'm doing this experiment on myself. Then all of a sudden, I got this device on me. I'm always, and the reason I'm more into it in that regard is because I'm also on social media now, and I'm talking about it a lot more. Whereas before, I was more focused on running Self Decode as the CEO, and to do that, I was just mainly very focused on that, and I was taking my supplements. I was taking maybe 40 a day. Now that I've just gotten like really into the stuff because I'm doing more of the influencing type thing, I'm just all day, I'm just involved in this stuff, like just chugging supplements, doing this device, doing that device on me. So it is quite fun and interesting just to be doing experiments on myself all day, and I really enjoy it. I wanted to talk to you about 3 supplements that 2 of them I know you created, and one of them I first heard from you. So there's dihydroberberine, Paraxanthine, and ergothioneine. You mentioned ergothioneine, and I think I heard of it before, and I was just like, but I never took it. And you said it was one of your top mitochondrial enhancers. And I was like, I love mitochondrial enhancers. I'm taking it. Like, when you were talking about it, I'm like, order iHerb, done. Coming, it's on the way. So let's talk about some of those. We could talk about ergothioneine first.
Okay.
Tell me about it. Tell me what you think of it, why you take it, what dosage.
Yeah, so like famed anti-aging researcher Dr. Bruce Ames, who Dr. Rhonda Patrick actually spun out of his lab, he is well known for like bringing acetyl L-carnitine and ALA to the market for anti-aging purposes, did research on those ingredients, alpha lipoic acid, and stacking those, and really cool research. And he calls this the anti-aging vitamin, or the longevity vitamin. And this very well could be one of the first vitamins in a long time, a new vitamin. PQQ was potentially researched as one. But ergothioneine is something that occurs naturally in certain organ meats, certain beans, and many mushrooms. And it's a trace amino acid, so very small doses of it. But we're finding that there's a unique transporter system for it in your body, and it's called the ETT. So think about that. Like, there's very few nutrients. Iron is one that I can think of that has a unique transporter and then a unique storage system for it in your body so that your body can call upon it when it needs it. And we've demonstrated that there's a deficiency of it. So it actually is meeting the criteria for a potential vitamin. And so this is fascinating stuff, that your body has this transporter system. There's a potential deficiency. It has a storage system to call upon it. And it's not just a cellular antioxidant, but a mitochondrial antioxidant. And so protecting that mitochondria, that energy factory, that that produces this energy currency for the body, ATP. And I've said before that mito is the next keto, that mitochondrial health is at the core of biological versus chronological aging. It's at the core for 99% of disease, as 99% of disease is metabolic in nature. So we're looking at mitochondrial health as something that's so key to our health in general, to the reason that we see glycation, inflammation, oxidation, telomere shortening, etc. And it's something that we certainly want to control for. And 87% of Americans are metabolically dysfunctional and on the edge of type 2 diabetes, glucose intolerant. And certainly there's concerns there about that. So having a nutrient like this, and it's a small dose, we're looking at like 5 to 10 milligrams a day. And there may be some benefit to loading on it, similar to maybe like the creatine concept, because there is a storage system for it in your body. So we don't really know the definitive use of it yet. There's still more research to be done. It's kind of early in that process, but it is a potent mitochondrial antioxidant, and it's certainly been shown to be anti-aging in nature and reduce mitochondrial dysfunction and promote mitochondrial biogenesis, similar to using things like spermidine, which is promoting autophagy as well, as like a fasting mimetic. Stacking those two could be really excellent. And then beyond that, I would look to potentially stack an NAD booster, of which I think NMN may be the best one at this moment, like in that 500 milligram to 2 gram range. And if you can handle it, I think stacking, maybe not as high of NMN if you want to stack it with this other ingredient, is just a full-fledged niacin. Nicotinic acid actually promotes NAD, but you will have to deal with, this is a high dose twice a day, 500 milligrams twice a day. You'll have to deal with paresthesis, which is that sunburn, tingling, itching feeling that niacin can cause. So, you might want to start with 100 milligrams, take it 4 times a day, work up to 200 milligrams, and then eventually get to 500 milligrams twice a day. And then on the other side of this, to protect NAD, to help it hang around longer, a number of these polyphenols inhibit NADase, also called CD38, because as we age, we make less NAD and we break it down faster. And NAD is going to promote the production of ATP and keep mitochondria healthy. So, and also protect the DNA. And so we want to get enough of these polyphenols. Now, it's been shown resveratrol is great, pterostilbene is great, quercetin and EGCG. But there's been studies that show FISSN from strawberries and apigenin from parsley could be the 2 most potent and effective, and in particular, inhibiting this NADase CD38 enzyme that keeps it hanging around longer. So taking NMN, taking full-fledged niacin, nicotinic acid, taking apigenin, FISSN, all stacked together would help. And then taking spermidine and taking ergothioneine would also help. And this is going to be like your ultimate mitochondrial stack.
Okay, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm just like, I'm writing some notes down. I'm like, I want to ask a bunch of questions there, a bunch of questions there. There's a lot to unpack. One thing I want to say about the mitochondria, I'm a huge fan of the mitochondria, improving the mitochondria. And the areas where you notice the most impact from mitochondrial improvement are the areas in the body where you use a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So things like the brain, the cardiovascular system, and
the heart,
and your immune system is just a huge factory for it needs tons of energy. And so what I noticed when my mitochondria were weaker, and this is why I actually decided to really improve it, was I said, okay, I'm very healthy, but I don't feel like my immune system is as healthy as it should be. And I thought it was because of my mitochondria, and I was right. And that's basically when, let's say you don't get a lot of sleep and then the next day you feel like run down, your immune system is run down. It shouldn't be like that. You still want to get sleep, of course, but you shouldn't feel like you're running, your nose is running after a day of not sleeping well, right? And so that is a symptom that your mitochondria is not working well if you feel run down after 5 hours of sleep one night, let's say.
Absolutely. So what actually happens when you get like 6.5 hours or less of sleep, it's been shown that you're actually insulin resistant in your brain cells, in your neurons. And so this is why you get into these states called insufficient cellular energy, which is ICE is the acronym, or in the brain, a lot of these neurological versions of ICE is called brain energy gap. But the concept is the same in that there's a shortfall of energy being created versus the energy needed. And especially when you're essentially putting your brain into type 2 diabetes acutely because you didn't get enough sleep, and you literally feel that brain fog and your synapses are firing slower, and you have inflammation in the brain, neuroinflammation, this is all because you didn't get enough sleep. And if you do this chronically, you essentially have a diabetic brain, and you are heading towards 3 times the rate of cardiovascular disease and 5 times the rate of type 2 diabetes, et cetera. But absolutely, not getting enough sleep is going to play a role in your mitochondria being subpar in the energy that they're producing. And when you do this, this is like having a car that's supposed to run on super, you're giving it like regular gas or even diesel or, something, and it's just chugging along, and it's creating more oxidants. It's creating more inflammation, more glycation, which is blood sugar damage. The telomeres are shortening. There's DNA methylation issues happening. Like there's a lot that's going on as a result of you not having enough mitochondrial energy. So this is why it's so critical. Like it's at the core of everything. I believe it's like one of the most important things that you can track.
For sure. But it's also the case that, so obviously, like you said, sleep is very important for mitochondria, but it's also the case that if you have very robust mitochondria, you can tolerate less sleep in the short term without any serious consequences.
Totally.
But it's still not recommended, because why would you stress your system like that? It's just that you can get away with that without getting sick right away, or something like drinking alcohol or taking pot, which are immune suppressants. You can get away with that a little more as far as your immune system is concerned if your mitochondria are already working very well.
Yeah, that's resilience, and that's being anti-fragile. And there's the idea in the body known as allostatic capacity. And basically, it's your stress bucket. And the more anti-fragile you are, the more mitochondria biogenesis you have, the more optimally running mitochondria you have, the more resilient you have, the bigger that stress bucket is, the more stress you can take on. And there's also the idea of that you're talking about of mitohormesis, where you can stress the mitochondria to an ideal level to actually create more mitochondria and push them, like taking your mitochondria to the gym. So you don't always want to be, to your point, in kind of like the perfectly held tight zone. We actually see this with how thermically controlled we are in society, that we're in this like little window of room temperature all the time. And we've become weak in that we don't have the resilience to deal with the hot and the cold like we used to. And so we don't have that resilience. We're not taking our mitochondria to the gym like we used to. And so that does play a role, without a doubt, that it's ideal to challenge ourselves sometimes. It's just not ideal to do it all the time, and most certainly not ideal to do it when we are fragile, when we are not resilient, when we are in a weakened state and our allostatic capacity is maxed out.
Right. I wanted to ask you about what the dosage of ergothioneine that you take. And
yeah,
do you take this daily, by the way? Like, how often do you take it? Okay.
I take it every day, and I take anywhere from 5 to 20 milligrams. Like, if I'm first starting out, maybe that first week, I'm taking around 20 milligrams. If I'm immunocompromised, I'm taking 20 milligrams. But if not, I'm just taking around 5 to 10 milligrams.
Okay, interesting. I take about 10 milligrams a day, and with my mega dosing experiment, I did 25 milligrams, and I
Nice.
felt that that day I had so much energy that I wasn't able to even like sleep until 2 in the morning. It was unbelievable.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think I was just deficient in ergothioneine maybe, but as just a regular dosage, I take 10 milligrams. So I was curious what you were taking. And I actually noticed something that you mentioned about spermidines, because a lot of people don't talk about it in terms of mitochondria. They talk about it in terms of autophagy. But I actually did notice that it was improving my mitochondria based on how I feel with other mitochondrial enhancers. And so, but it does, I feel like it doesn't get a lot of press, if you will, about improving the mitochondria.
Well, it does, so it does work on cellular autophagy, at that cellular level, but of which the mitochondria is an organelle in the cell. But it's also working. It's been shown to clean out the mitochondria, so mitophagy. So absolutely, that is, which is a whole new area of research. Again, that's very fascinating. Because again, we want to protect the function of the mitochondria. Certainly the cell, there's a lot of signaling that happens in the cell that I think, to your point towards the beginning of the show, cellular antioxidants are kind of equivocal on like how they work. And it's very much like dose and timing related. There's times when you actually want oxidation, and there's times when you don't. And then there's doses that take the antioxidant to a pro-oxidant level. And it's all very confusing on when to do what. So certainly that gets a little nebulous. But when it comes to the mitochondria, I feel like it's a lot more clear that these antioxidants and mitophagy are just clear-cut winners. And protecting the mitochondria is just a powerful way to keep up our cellular energy and not get into these insufficient cellular energy states.
So that's a good segue in what I want to talk about now with lipoic acid, because you mentioned that before, and this is one of the ones that was in my regimen, but I kicked it out as a result of I just didn't feel like it was as good as other stuff.
I agree.
And I wanted to know your take on lipoic acid, because there's some studies that show, one of the things I look for when I take a supplement is this thing promoting longevity in animal studies even, right? Mm-hmm. Even worm studies. Like that's just one of the data points, one of the 100 data points I'm looking at. And then when you look at lipoic acid, you kind of get this mixed picture.
Yeah.
You don't really get, it's not as powerful as some other stuff. And it has some, you kind of wonder maybe it's just not a great antioxidant. It's too much of an antioxidant maybe, and that's not good. Yeah. So tell me about what you think about lipoic acid, lipoic acid in particular.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's the alpha lipoic acid, and then there's the R form, which is an isomer, which is the ideal form. And then you need to get the sodium salt to stabilize it. The typical form is mixed isomer. It's not stabilized. It's actually very prone to break down under heat and light and moisture. And so, the stability of lipoic acid really isn't there unless you spend a ton of money. And I literally mean like 10 times the price. 2, to your point, I believe it's because it's an antioxidant, it gets confusing of when to dose it, the level to dose it. And you wouldn't even do that consistently because on certain days and times, you may have more cancer cells. And by the way, you always have cancer cells in your body. You may have a workout that just happened and you want some of that signaling to happen, that there was breakdown, that there is things happening that we need repair for. It's really confusing on when to dose and timing to dose. So with lipoic acid, I am reluctant as well. And I think the data is very mixed as well. And I do like, one of the ingredients that you mentioned before, the one that I worked on patenting, is dihydroberberine. Now, berberine has been shown as an oral glucose agent to be more effective, or at least as effective in a number of fronts, as metformin, which is the most storied glucose disposal agent there is. and probably the number one anti-aging ingredient that there is. There's actually a study going on with metformin with over 10,000 people that are non-diabetics right now, funded by the U.S. government, to see how effective it is at anti-aging. It's been used for probably 25 years for that purpose, because the lower we get hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose, insulin, the better. It's just the better. There isn't like that kind of optimal level. Certainly it plays a role. It's important, being insulin, and I'm not anti-insulin. But when it is suppressed, we do see more growth hormone, more autophagy, more of these kind of processes that are anti-aging and repairing that are taking place. So it's ideal to suppress insulin as much as possible. And that's where having a whole food diet, low stress in your life, having potentially a ketogenic diet, or at least doing cyclical, or something that's metabolically flexible, can be ideal. And then taking these kinds of compounds, these oral glucose agents, these disposal agents, like metformin or berberine, are ideal. The problem with metformin, it was tainted. It was pulled off the market from one lot recently. It depletes B12. You get GI distress. It's a pharmaceutical, and you have to get a prescription. And with berberine, it's poor bioavailability. There's a lot of bioindividuality based on gut microbiome, on how well it gets taken up and converted to the active dihydroberberine in the gut. So what we've seen is that there's about 5 times the bioavailability, which means much lower doses, and it lasts about twice as long in the plasma versus standard berberine. And we don't see that bioindividuality variance that you see with berberine or metformin. It seems to work well across the board for nearly everyone, because you're taking that microbiome conversion out of the equation. And so we're seeing dihydroberberine just be incredibly effective at much lower doses and less frequency.
That's really interesting. Berberine is part of my regimen. I love berberine, and I take it mainly. I take it for a couple reasons: anti-aging, reducing LDL cholesterol, reducing blood glucose, things like that. But I heard you talking about dihydroberberine, and I'm like, okay, I got to get this. Unfortunately, iHerb doesn't have it, so I just have to order it from Amazon to Israel, or just get it when I'm in the U.S., but it's definitely on the top of my list to try out. One of the things I was thinking about with dihydroberberine versus berberine, so berberine actually inhibits tmao, that the part in the gut microbiota that is increased by carnitine. And I do take carnitine. This kind of can go into another area I wanted to talk about, which is carnitine and tmao. So maybe we could talk about that first, I guess. But but TMAO is, you could see it as this bad thing in the gut that certain bad gut microbiota produce, and that contributes to heart disease and some other problems. And that's one of the reasons why they think red meat is not good, because it's got carnitine and increases the TMAO. Now, I like carnitine because I think it's a great mitochondrial supplement. And for me, it's just about, okay, now how do I reduce this negative effect from carnitine? So maybe you can unpack that. Carnitine, TMAO, do you take it, or do you... I was thinking about taking a gram of it, by the way, and I decided not to because of TMAO. So I'm only taking 500 milligrams, even though if it wasn't for TMAO, I would take a gram. So what do you think of carnitine, TMAO, and does berberine versus dihydroberberine impact the inhibition of TMAO?
Yes, on berberine and dihydroberberine being potentially protective against that. Berberine has been shown to do that, and berberine just converts to dihydroberberine at the gut, and then at the plasma level, it converts back to berberine. But again, you're kind of skipping this bioindividual gut microbiome component to where it's just active in the gut. And therefore, you get less GI distress and those kinds of things. And then as far as TMAO being damaging or being part of the pathological process, the pathogenesis of coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disease? That's a great question. I don't think it's necessarily that clear. It's almost like what it reminds me of is this is like correlation versus causation. And, for example, when we take creatine, high doses of creatine, we see elevated creatinine in the urine. And for a long time, doctors were doing urinalyses of people that were taking creatine, and they said, oh, people are damaging their kidneys because kidney damage has elevated levels of creatinine. But meanwhile, because you were taking creatine and it was just converting into creatinine and being eliminated, it was seemingly damaging your kidneys, but it's been shown to not do that at all. And this is just natural metabolism of creatine. So I do believe that we're seeing something like that take place. And I don't believe that it's this causation that's happening when you're taking carnitine supplements or eating more red meat. That is my gut feeling. I don't have proof.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think, in my preferred form of carnitine would be acetyl-L-carnitine, actually.
That's what I take.
Yeah, mitochondrial form. With L-carnitine, you really need like a large dose to get across this kind of like glucose gradient, insulin gradient. Like you need like a huge dose of carbohydrate, high glycemic carbohydrate, like potentially like 75 grams of dextrose or something to make the L-carnitine more effective and be transported into the cell. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So you're saying the acetyl-L-carnitine. I take acetyl-L-carnitine because it more easily it gets into the brain, and I feel it more in the brain more, right? But you're saying it actually gets into the cells much better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's very important to know. I wanted to go into the TMAO a bit because I kind of had the same feeling as you until I started to read these Mendelian randomization studies, which I would highly recommend. Which I would highly recommend that you do because it's part of my process now. When you're looking at a marker, whether it's creatinine, you could do Mendelian randomization, look up studies on creatinine, and you'll see there's no correlation between the genetic predisposition of higher levels and any kind of disease pretty much. But what scared me about TMAO is that these Mendelian randomizations are finding that there's causal in terms of TMAO and some kind of issue, right? Which means that...
So one thing that I would add there, though, Joe, that there's correlations on top of correlations. Like one thing that happened where we ended up villainizing high sodium or high red meat was that people that were eating those diets were having ultra processed food and high glycemic carbohydrate and having inflammatory vegetable oils in their diets. And then we were villainizing salt and we were villainizing high fat and we were villainizing high cholesterol and all these things. Whereas when we take those out of the ultra processed bucket and we're just having high sodium or high protein or high fat, we don't see that. So
right. So the thing,
watch out.
So the with the Mendelian randomization is an independent variable because what they're doing is they're taking a genetic predisposition, which is independent of other variables, and they're looking, okay, if you have a genetic predisposition for higher TMAO, regardless of what else you're eating, what else you're doing, it's not completely independent because it could be, for example, picking up something like people who are eating more meat. Maybe, for example, some people might have a tendency to eat more meat, and that's why they have higher TMAO. But what they are picking up is it is an independent variable to a large degree, where people who have a genetic predisposition for increased TMAO, maybe because they're converting it better or whatever it is, they're finding that there is some negative impacts. And I think it's just one of the things that, in health, there's a lot of opportunities for cognitive dissonance where something could be good in 20 ways and it could be bad in one. And I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that, as in like, it's got to be good in every way, right? It cannot be bad.
Totally. And
so
this goes back to, like, I love that you bring this up, because there can be signaling that happens that's very much needed of damage on a lighter level. This goes back to like that idea of hormesis. And when you have, for example, berberine or dihydroberberine, people say, oh, it stresses the mitochondria. We've seen that. Okay, it does. And there's a certain dose that's actually ideal. That ideal stress is mitohormesis, and we're actually seeing it increase biogenesis, mitochondrial biogenesis. So we're actually seeing it enhance mitochondrial function. We're seeing it enhance mitochondrial number, because it's potentially stressing it to a light degree. So it's really fascinating. I agree with you. It's a really deep dive. I think we need a lot more research on the TMAO. But
yeah, and it's not, there's no clear answer one way or another. It does seem like there's some negatives of it. It doesn't seem clear exactly what it is or how significant it is. I'm just from what I'm looking at. But I still take carnitine regardless, just because I find that it's got so many benefits, and I'm taking other things to reduce the TMAO. So I'm kind of minimizing that negative. In terms of the berberine, I actually did notice some like GI distress from taking berberine. I wasn't sure if it was just in my head. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's literally because of the conversion. And again, certain gut microbiome compositions are going to have a greater efficiency or propensity towards doing that more efficiently, converting berberine to dihydroberberine. But for certain people, and we see this probably, I would say, with metformin and berberine, we see probably about a third of the population at normal doses really struggle with it gastrointestinally. So it's significant. It's not like a small number. And I think because of that, you're actually seeing the bioavailability and the efficacy be reduced. So taking, again, the active form, the dihydroberberine, would solve that kind of bypass, that bioindividuality, that bioavailability issue.
That's interesting. And I get more GI effects from metformin, by the way, just to randomly put that out there. One of the things, moving on to, we were talking about antioxidants and lipoic acid. One of the things that I didn't want to take this at first, but I recently decided to incorporate astaxanthine into my regimen. And the reason is because this is getting into the cells and the mitochondria and the lipid layer. That's why I'm doing it. Tell me what you think about it. Is this suffering from the same plagues as other antioxidants? Because we know that, like you said, you don't want to take just a lot of antioxidants, or you want to do it in a very smart way. So tell me what you think about astaxanthine.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think taking astaxanthin, which is one of the great carotenoids, the marine carotenoids, there's also some others like fucoxanthin that are great too. And I think we're going to see more of these marine carotenoids pop up. And I think they have a synergy with other fats when co-administered. So where it would be great, going to the idea, like you say, where there's a lot of benefits, but maybe some negatives, fish oil could be one of those. We see a lot of benefits, but also some not so great aspects of fish oil, especially depending on the degree it's kind of processed, and whether it's the ethyl ester versus the triglyceride and all these different things, maybe the ratios of DHA and EPA. Taking astaxanthin, I believe, is really good insurance with your fish oil when co-administering, and it's going to enhance the effect of the astaxanthin. So you're enhancing the fish oil and you're enhancing the astaxanthin. The astaxanthin gets absorbed better because of the fish oil and being co-administered with fatty acids. And then the fish oil, which may have some oxidants in it, some things that maybe aren't so great, is being neutralized because of the astaxanthin. So taking something around 3 milligrams with your Fish oil, I think, is ideal. I think, again, you just have to be careful with how much and how high you're dosing some of these antioxidants. But for me, that's one that I think makes sense with fish oil.
So do you take astaxanthin as well?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I've been taking about 4 milligrams, so it's around what you're mentioning. And 2 milligrams I read is what people get in a normal healthy diet a day if they're consuming like
definitely not a standard American diet.
No, obviously not. I'm talking about like people who are eating fish and a healthier diet.
In particular, the kind of reddish or pinkish, like when you're talking like salmon or any kind of fish that's kind of along those lines, that's one, fattier or has that reddish pinkish hue, you're going to see be higher in these marine carotenoids.
You mentioned NMN and nicotinic acid. Now, I take NMN, not in the dosage that you described. I take, I think it's, 170, 250 milligrams a day, I think it is. Something like that. 250 milligrams, let's say. And the nicotinic acid, the reason why I don't take that is they've done a lot of studies on nicotinic acid for heart disease because it raises HDL cholesterol. And the studies find that it does not improve all-cause mortality. And you're taking this or somebody's taking it for longevity. The whole idea is you want to improve all-cause mortality. You want to lower it. What is your view of the fact that it doesn't impact all-cause mortality based on the studies I've seen?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of complexity when it comes to the way niacin nicotinic acid affects cholesterol and fatty acid synthesis and some of these pathways. I would say, the study that I'm looking at, it increased NAD at the muscle level, in the tissue 8 times. Like, it was pretty dramatic, and really that's more effective than what we would see with maybe even an NAD IV or injection, and certainly NMN or NR. And I think what's also hard to know is there's a period where niacin is like more pronounced in its effect, like where you have that paresthesis be more acutely pronounced, where it's more experiential from having that tingling and burning and kind of peripheral superficial blood flow and activation of the nerves superficially, that it's just hard for me to say. Like, I think this is one of those ingredients that like over time seems to like settle in and reduce in like how extreme it might be doing something. And I don't have all the reasons for that, but I would say one of the things I'm most interested in with niacin, not only is the NAD aspect, but because it's affecting NAD levels, looking at, and because it brings that superficial blood flow and nervous system activation, that doing niacin, the full-fledged niacin right before doing red light could be really profound too, because you'd be more likely to utilize to have impact from that red light at that superficial level in your mitochondria. So that's one I've been exploring too, but it's a great question. Look, when it comes to cholesterol, I think we could have a whole show on, I think cholesterol is the biggest scam in medical history. When you actually look at cholesterol levels, the higher your cholesterol, the longer you live. And LDL is not the bad cholesterol. There's nothing in your body that's the bad something. Like that's always just oversimplification. I do think, just looking at total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, those are calculated numbers. That's really not effective. If your doctor's putting you on a statin based on those, I think that's horrendous. They should at least say, okay, I see this. Let's get an NMR or VAP test so that we can dive into these subfractions, these chylomicrons, all these things, and see what's going on that level. And if like VLDL is elevated, then that can be an issue. And in particular, looking at lipoprotein A, to me, is probably the most important marker of cardiovascular health. That's the one I would really look at and then take concern with. But when you see higher cholesterol literally is associated with longer life, and we see people put on statins that end up having, worse mortality rates, and certainly having more muscle spasms and depletion of CoQ10, decreased, the cholesterol is important for steroid synthesis, so testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. It's also important for the fatty layer of the cell. And then certainly the brain is mostly fat, and cholesterol is really important for that. There's so much that's cholesterol is really important for in the body, and this is just a whole other discussion.
I agree with you actually on pretty much all the things you mentioned. Where first of all, I think you should do an NMR, like you said, and which I've done, and my lipoprotein particle number is still too high. The last time I did, I want to do another one, but you also want to look at ApoB and lipoprotein A. All of those are not in the optimal range for me. And given that I also have a predisposition for cardiovascular disease with my genetics and a family history of it, it's something that I have to take very seriously. I think when it comes to LDL, and I agree, by the way, that cholesterol is very important for a lot of things, right? There's a reason why some people have higher cholesterol, just genetic variations. It's not, there's benefits to it. And when I try statins, I haven't tried it much, just one or two experiments. I have noticed, hey, wait a second, I could see why cholesterol is a good thing here, right? There's certain things, there's certain reasons why you don't want to do that, but it's something that I mean, one thing that I might, one point that I might make is when I look up statins and reduction of all-cause mortality, we do see a reduction in all-cause mortality for the studies that I looked at. But just going back to nicotinic acid, it does reduce lipoprotein A, right? Which is a cause of heart disease. It does increase NAD. It does a whole bunch of things that are good for you, right? Yeah. And I think it reduces the lipoprotein, the particle number, the LDL number, and stuff like that. So there's all these reasons that it's good for you. The question is why don't studies show that it's decreasing overall mortality? I can't answer that question. That's the only thing, and the negative side effects. That's why I don't take it. But it's possible I could add it to my regimen. It's something that I want to understand it more before I take it. This is my theory is that, one, these doses get super high in some of the cholesterol studies. And certainly I'm talking about high doses. But like I mentioned, when you extrapolate out animal data for NMN, you can get up into 1 to 2 gram ranges. So my thought, and NMN is very expensive, by the way. So my thought is that stack a pathway, exploit a pathway, like push a pathway, a direction that you want by taking these two ingredients together, and therefore they should have synergy, and you can lower the doses respectively. So, maybe you can take 250 to 500 milligrams of the NMN, and maybe you can take a couple hundred milligrams twice a day of the niacin. That's not a bad idea. I think that's something that I want to explore more. That's not a bad idea because, like you said, it's probably that the doses were simply too high. Whereas if you take a lower dose, you stack NMN. What about just taking like 100 milligrams? You think that would do anything? Yeah, I believe that anything along that way. Like honestly, again, it's dose dependent. What's interesting is like I said early on, like if you're not taking high dose niacin like regularly, the 100 milligrams will feel like 500 milligrams. Like so. There's like an acute aspect to this too that's interesting to kind of tease out from what's happening chronically versus what happens acutely. Like how much is the flush important? Like that's a question that I have and really needs to be explored. Like how important is that flushing
to what's happening in the body. And it seems like there is, when we compare forms of niacin, that there is benefit to this flush. And so and in particular, like I'm saying, maybe leverage that flush with the red light, doing like infrared sauna and things like that. So
I like it. Now, the last supplement I wanted to talk about was paraxanthine. So you actually, like the dihydroberberine, you were the first formulator of this paraxanthine. Yeah. Tell us about paraxanthine. I just did an experiment with the pills that you gave me, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I liked it, just FYI.
Yeah, people
I need more pills. Give me more.
That's something that we hear consistently is give me more. I had a friend of mine that's a billionaire the other day who was like, saying like, I was explaining the ingredient and he's like, how are you going to get everyone educated on this? And I'm like, you don't need to. Like, people take it once and they're just like, I want more. It's that simple. It's like things like DMAA and ephedrine and some of these ingredients that have been so popular, and even the ones that I put out there prior, like T-crene and dynamine, they're really popular. They're really experiential. You don't need to explain them to people. But there is great science here in that the CYP1A2, you know this with genes and caffeine metabolism, up to 59% of us are not ideal metabolizers of caffeine. And so when we look at that, it means that you can take up to 10.5 hours for the half-life of caffeine, meaning it can be days before you clear caffeine. And what we see is caffeine has very little benefit in and of itself and actually has some degree of toxicity. It's actually in plants to be toxic to insects. And caffeine then turns into theobromine, theophylline, and paraxanthine on the metabolite level. On the next, it demethylates, it removes a methyl group. And so those are the three compounds it can convert into. And theobromine, I feel like, is largely ineffective and is toxic to dogs and cats. Theophylline is a controlled substance, bronchodilator, a ton of side effects. And paraxanthine is the thing that really gives us all the benefit, the neurological benefit, the focus, the adenosine inhibition. In our animal studies, we've already shown that it increases BDNF, decreases amyloid plaques, increases nitric oxide to the brain via PDE9 inhibition, increases glutathione and catalase, the antioxidants that are so critical, reduces oxidative stress as a result, increases dopamine and serotonin and glutamate. So we're seeing that this has a profound effect on brain health and really is neuroprotective on that level. Whereas, caffeine really hasn't been that effective. And when we look at studies where we tease out slow and fast metabolizers, we do see that the reason that these caffeine studies in the past have been fairly equivocal, meaning mixed results, we see that when you look at fast versus slow, you actually see the fast getting really great results, and we see the slow actually getting counterproductive results where it's like reducing their performance levels and cognitive function and having more mental errors and all that kind of stuff. So basically, the people that are slow metabolizers are getting way more side effect and very little benefit with caffeine.
I'm pretty sure I'm a slow metabolizer, and I have those negative effects.
But even fast metabolizers adapt quickly. They have adaptation, and these are the people, I can have coffee and go straight to bed. They are getting very little benefit as well because it takes more and more and more and more for them. But at least they're not getting all the side effects like the slow metabolizers. So what we're seeing is this effect be dramatic and across the board and experiential with little side effect when people of either slow or fast metabolizers are taking the paraxanthine. And this is why we filed like around 23 patents on this. We have about 13 studies. We have a study with e-gaming. We have a fat loss study, performance study with weight training. And we've already shown neurologically, cognitive wise, it's dramatic at reducing errors, at improving focus, improving energy. And we're seeing that it has a very reasonable half-life of around 3 hours. So there's good clearance. Like, so if you do like training in the evening, for example, you'll be able to get great sleep. And we don't see that with caffeine. There's a number of people, if they, take caffeine, especially in kind of these pre-workout doses in the evenings, it's disrupting sleep quality and quantity. Whereas we're not seeing that with paraxanthine. And we also
I can attest to that, by the way, meaning like I took it and, 6 hours later, I was able to, I was starting to get, like, there was no impact. I even think it improved my sleep.
Yeah, same.
Whereas caffeine.
We hear that a lot.
Caffeine definitely, the only time caffeine doesn't worsen my sleep is if I take it like first thing in the morning, because I'm a slow metabolizer. So
same
if I really give it 16 hours, then, we're talking, okay, that's fine. But with the paraxanthine, I took it, I think it was, I forgot the exact time, but I was good to go to sleep pretty much. It gave me a good boost, and then I got a great night's sleep that night.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is we're hearing that pretty consistently, that people are getting better sleep on it, and not just, it's not impairing sleep, but they're getting better sleep. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then lastly, like, we're getting a lot of feedback on the mood enhancement, the swagger or confidence. And I think that's correlated pretty deeply to the dopamine and certainly serotonin aspects, that you're getting that mood lift. And it's very unique to paraxanthine in a way that we don't see with caffeine. And again, I think part of that's just caffeine is this slow drip to paraxanthine, whereas just taking paraxanthine directly, like, you're avoiding all of these other chemicals, these other compounds, and you're just getting right to the thing that works.
Can you buy paraxanthine on the internet, or it's just in your
There's two companies that we've kind of soft launched with right now while we're getting all of our research. We want to get to about 15 studies before we go broad. We already have self-affirmed GRAS, meaning it's approved for use in food and beverage. We already have all the regulatory in the U.S. Taken care of, and again, we have, about 9 or 10 studies finished and about 5 more underway. But yes, you can buy it. We have partners with Iovate, which is muscle tech, and Hydroxycut. So you're going to see many products from them coming out in the next few months. They already have a pre-workout called Euphoric, spelled with an IQ at the end. And then a fat burning product that's a pill and a powder called Burn IQ. Those products are already out. And then there's an energy drink from Mikey and David Hess of Hess Oil and Gas that did Recess CBD drink. This drink is called Update, and it's a full dose of paraxanthine plus a bunch of nootropics in a sugar-free energy drink that's a flavored water. It's a seltzer, and it's really good. And you can get it at drinkupdate.com. So those are the two places you can get it, is Hydroxycut, Muscle Tech, and then also at drinkupdate.com.
Okay, interesting. But there's no, I wonder why I can't just, like, I like to buy things separately to try it out more.
That's how we've launched it so far. I will tell you that we are working with a partner right now that in the next month or two, it should be out as a solo product from a very well-known brain expert that I've been working with for a while. So you'll see that.
I see the paraxanthine in iHerb actually does have it, but it has all these other ingredients that I'm just like, I really want to try it out on its own more. So
yeah, but, I mean, in the products that we put it in, it's the only cognitive well, I should say it's the only methylxanthine. It's the only CNS stimulant. Like, we never have it combined with theophylline, theobromine, caffeine, teocrine, dynamine, etc. Like, it's not with any of those ingredients at the moment.
Okay.
It's always on its own. So for the moment, you can experience that effect on its own.
Interesting. Okay. Last question that I have for you, and we're going over time here, but last question I have is testing. What do you, what do you look at in terms of testing? What do you track? What do you look at in your genetics, or just how do you see testing? And tell me more about that.
Well, I want to explore, we've talked about this. I need to do the self-decode. I think you guys have the most robust testing that I've seen. It's something that I promoted in my book, The Energy Formula. I've done some work through some doctors I've worked with, like Dr. Stickler out of Austin. And I want to just go down this path with actually yours. So that's what I plan on doing in the very near future, because it is the most robust I've seen. I think you guys have the best system in the game for kind of understanding and exploring your epigenetics. So, I love that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I really mean that too. And so that's where I stand. But also, like, again, I've worked with concierge medicine for a while where, I'm also, I've done some work with Dr. Gladden out of Dallas too. And these are definitely two big names in anti-aging concierge medicine and peptides and, things like that. And so we do play with a number of anti-senolytics and peptides and, some of these kind of things, and certainly these interventions like red light and saunas and cold plunges and all these things that we know to do. And so I do extensive blood work and genetic testing and even gut microbiome, et cetera. So I'm a big fan of testing. That's actually the first letter of my Energy Formula book, is the experiment letter, where I go into the importance of testing and understanding your baseline. You really need to know your baseline before you add in interventions to know what these interventions are doing. And even a wearable is really important. So like I'm, using the Oura Ring, but things like BioStrap or Whoop Strap or Garmin Phoenix or whatever are great as well.
It's really funny. I'm obviously a very big fan of testing, but what's really funny is that the people who take a lot of supplements like us, we're also big into testing. And so these other people who never test anything are like, your liver's probably shot. Well, have you ever done an ultrasound of your liver? We're actually testing our blood and genetics and all these other factors, and we're making sure that what we're doing is good for us. Where these other people, they're like, they heard something from their doctor once, like, oh, you're just you just have expensive pee or something. And they're like not testing anything, and their liver is they probably have a fatty liver and visceral fat like crazy.
This is actually like, I know some pro bodybuilders that take a number of like these methylated oral steroids that are, tough on your liver, but, they do all the precautions, they do all the right things. They're working with doctors, they're getting the blood work, and they actually have very healthy livers. And, people are always making fun of them, like, oh, your liver's, trash and you're going to die so early. And it's like, again, to your point, people that are having the standard American diet with all these pro-inflammatory vegetable oils and having all these high glycemic carbohydrates and eating all the GMOs and all this stuff that they're getting, that's just food and beverage. That's not even the other stresses, like from, EMFs and toxic relationships and, everything down the line. Like, right. So many people just have so much toxicity in their lives that's stressing their body and their livers, so absolutely.
Right. They're like eating fast food and they're on TikTok and they're like, oh, you're stressing your liver. It's like, you're stressing your liver right now at Burger King, I
know. When they're eating 20 chicken nuggets and having a Coke.
And they think, oh, this guy's taking a lot of supplements. It's just funny. You've always been into mood. It's something that you've struggled with historically a lot. Yeah. What are your top mood supplements? And we'll end with that.
Yeah. And this is a great question. And, I just presented on psychedelics, and I think medicine has oversimplified things and just drilling into serotonin alone and not looking at the whole milieu of neurotransmitters that all play an important role. Like we were just talking about with dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, endorphins, histamine, on down the line, GABA, all that stuff is important. But that said, serotonin is really important when I'm low. Like, I wouldn't chronically take all these things, but when I'm feeling low, it's really helpful for me to take an SSRI that's natural. And that would be Kanna, a Kanna extract in particular, the branded patented Zembrin extract. I take 25 milligrams of, and that helps like after a journey, if you've done plant medicine, after kind of depletive experience, then I find that helps replete serotonin, reestablish serotonin. And I take it with larger doses of 5-HTP, which helps synthesize serotonin. So you're helping serotonin hang around longer and you're making more of it so you can bounce back faster. And some of the other things that modulate serotonin that would be good to take with it would be things like saffron extract, especially standardized to safranal, vitamin D3, and SAMe. So those would be some ingredients that help get you going there. And then if you've done a lot of processing and feel really depleted from that aspect, like a lot of mental work, a lot of deep work, a lot of thinking, you've depleted acetylcholine typically. And so taking something that is an acetyl donor, like we talked about acetyl-L-carnitine, taking a good choline source like alpha GPC or CDP choline, and then lastly taking sometimes, not all the time, be careful with this one, but acetylcholine esterase inhibitor that again helps it hang around. I don't like taking like SSRIs chronically or something like this inhibitor chronically. But sometimes when you're depleted, to help bounce back faster makes sense. And so the
you're talking about like huperzine A.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So,
and when you say SSRIs, just to be clear, you're not talking about, fluoxetine or something. You're talking about natural SSRIs, like the Kanna, the Zembrin, and the saffron. Exactly.
Yep.
Okay. One thing I would like to point out something. I like those supplements, by the way, but I think when it comes to this area, people have very unique neurochemistries.
Totally.
And for me in particular, what I find is that serotonin is critical for my mood, but it has to be in certain parts of the brain. And for some reason, certain supplements do that better than others. And I know because if I don't take anything for my mood, I will get an unstable mood because I'm bombarded with stress all the time. So it's that especially like accelerates it. So I have to know how to be really calm in the face of stress. And what I find is that the Zembrin and the saffron are good, but they don't counteract that stress. That if I'm low on serotonin, they don't hit the right part of serotonin in the brain for me, right? And I could see it working for other people, but what I find 5-HTP hits the spot, EGCG hits the spot, and then there's a bunch of like curcumin for some reason hits that spot, even though it's not strongly serotonergic.
Actually, so curcumin, especially tetrahydrocurcumin, the metabolite, has been shown to be an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor and also modulate histamine for wakefulness. So,
interesting.
There's some nootropic benefits there. But yeah, you make a great point. Absolutely. Bioindividuality is a thing, and it's like 10x a thing on neurochemistry. This is why when someone tells you their nootropic stack, race and all this stuff, it does not apply to you. You have to literally do these things one at a time and just see what works for you and keep stacking, keep experimenting. It just doesn't, you can't make across the board recommendations.
But I love the stack that you described. I think they're all good. And so I think they can work. I've heard for some people that Kanna Zembrin was a miracle, right? Yeah. So I think that it is a good stack. And, saffron and Zembrin are on my, I still have to figure out if I'm including them or not because I like them, but I've got a lot of supplements. But anyway, we're coming to the end. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been very enjoyable. I learned quite a lot, and I always love to learn from people that have a lot of information. Tell us where people can find you, and if you have anything to promote or
yeah. So yeah, thank you. At Shawn Wells, SHAWN, Shawn, and at Shawn Wells on Instagram, and I have a lot of great content there, a lot of infographics, and my top 10 supplements for depression, for men's health, for whatever it is. I get into all that research at ShawnWells.com, SHAWN. I have a free newsletter that kind of breaks down studies and different things every week. And you're not going to be sold to a list. You're not going to be charged anything. So it's just a free newsletter. And then lastly, energyformula.com. I have my book, the biohacking book, Energy Formula, that's been a bestseller and has like 70 full color diagrams and surveys and summaries and quizzes and all kinds of cool stuff in it that you would love. And if you go to energyformula.com to get it, you'll get the free fasting guide, a hidden chapter on natural movement, recipe book, all kinds of stuff. And I have the ebook, I have the hardcover, the soft cover, and the Audible version that I read myself. So those would be the best places to find me. And I will also answer any questions from this episode on my DMs if you visit me at Shawn Wells on Instagram, and I'd be glad to answer those.
Thank you so much for all your time and all your knowledge. Really appreciate everything. And have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Joe. I'll talk to you soon.